Uh, Good morning. My name is Calvin. I'm the host for Startup Thoughts, and our aim is trying to empower youth into entrepreneurship through storytelling. So pretty much that's our overall goal of what we wanted to achieve. And so we take along a lot of entrepreneurs that have actually done something. Then we interview them so that at least their story will tend to inspire somebody. And I believe there are a lot of youth that will be inspired through these stories. So today, I'm honored to be with Luipa. With a short description, he's an entrepreneur from Zambia. He owns a microfinance, which is called Lubono. In other words, it's called wealth, if I'm not mistaken. Wealth or riches, something to do with that. And yeah, he have a vast amount of experience when it comes to entrepreneurship. We have been into the ups and downs of entrepreneurship. And today I have him on board, and it's an honor, and I'm very happy to interview you. And I think I will just give it to you so that you just introduce yourself, and then you tell us about yourself and who are you, and what kind of a person are you?
Thank you very much, Calvin. Yeah, it's nice to talk to you and to have this opportunity to share my experience as a young Zambian and African entrepreneur, who's been trying to build a successful microfinance / financial technology firm over the last 5 years. I'm based in Lusaka, and
Yes,
I got involved in this whole madness of entrepreneurship, I think beginning the end of 2005, beginning of 2006. And this was at the point after, when I left high school. And so I left high school in 2005. And in 2006, I joined my brothers in Lusaka, who had already been involved in one form of entrepreneurial activity or the other. And now I was trying to figure out what was going to happen next in my life. How I was going to go to university and that sort of thing. Obviously, the background is I come from a very modest family. My father used to work in the mines and that sort of thing. So I think that the typical African child, the story of a typical African child is often that, you finish high school and now you have to, like going to university is not always a given. It's something that you have to navigate around. You always have to think about how you're going to raise the finances to pay your university fees and that sort of thing. So it took me at least a good 2 years. It took myself and my parents, well, let's call it my family, a couple of years before I could figure that one out. But in between that, or at least during that 2 years, I spent it with my brothers who had built, like a block of 3 shops. One which we managed as a barbershop, and the other 2 we sort of list out to, I think one was a grocery store, if I remember correctly, and the other was a spare parts shop. So it was from spending time with my elder siblings that I realized that I could actually be spending time doing something that I like to do. And somehow it's through that opportunity that I started cultivating this interest in setting up a business of my own at some point in the future. And so fast forward to 2008, I finally was able to raise finances through family and friends to go to university and that sort of thing. So I enrolled to go to the Catholic University in Zambia, where I did my bachelor's studies in business administration. So I spent 4 years sort of trying to get understanding theoretical concepts behind how businesses or successful businesses are built and run and that sort of thing. In between, I know that during those 4 years, I did spend some time working as a research assistant to a few friends, friends and colleagues of friends from various universities. I had friends that were coming in from Oxford and that sort of thing, all doing research around mining and entrepreneurship in Zambia and that sort of thing. So again, that was opening me up to, a different world. Like I was working as a research assistant in this moment. And then I was also spending time talking to people that I didn't expect, so people that were working as in C-level sort of positions in the mining companies and that sort of thing. I think that I was becoming, somehow I was being inspired to try and, I think through these experiences, talking to different people, I was drawing this, some inspiration in the sense of how I could tailor my life after the 4 years of my studies. So it just turned out that at the end of, 2012, I finished my bachelor studies, and then again, you somehow at these crossroads where you have to figure out what next in your life,
Yes.
And I think the hope then was that I think that the general sense is that after you've been through a university training of some sort, I think the general idea is that you should get a job, right? If you don't get a job, then maybe something is just wrong. But those fundamentals don't always play out right. I think that there's several factors that influence the outcome of your decision. So it just turned out that I couldn't find a job, and therefore I went back to spent a few months, at least months or years, with my brothers, again building this snack and beverage sort of vending machine services business, which was the first in Zambia. So I spent some time working with them, and then as I was working with my siblings, I do remember once when it was a very sort of stressful period because we were trying to raise capital to invest in this, really good business model that had been built already. And what was really interesting is that there was an already existing pool of customers, majority of whom, these financial institutions in Lusaka. And it was very strange to me that even when they had shown interest and were sort of the market that was ready to take up what we were, at least my siblings and I were offering in the sense of, snack and beverage vending machines, they were still not prepared to provide the business with the working capital that we needed for us to scale to that sort of level. So we had to look to other micro lending institutions or whatever financial institutions existed in Zambia. And this was around, I think, 2000, maybe just around 2008. Yeah, I think this was also around the same time as I was doing my undergrad. So maybe 2009, 2010, towards the end. And so it proved very difficult to find access to the right, to the right financial support for our business that was established by my brothers and myself. And so we ended up, I think that the decision ultimately turned out to be that we went and borrowed from one of the existing, I think it's one of the oldest, existing micro-lending institutions in Zambia. And, it was at a huge price, of course. They ask you to provide security, first of all, you have to provide security, collateral and all these things. They give you this list of requirements that often, when you're a small business, you cannot afford to meet, right?
Yeah,
the demands are always.
I know, right?
Yeah, the demands are always ridiculous. So anyway, we were somehow able to meet some of the requirements, and we somehow succeeded to get this loan. But the price, the interest on this loan was quite ridiculous, and it was very frustrating because there was no other alternative. It's either you got this, ridiculously priced loan or you got nothing. So anyway, we took it. And we were able to pay, invested that money in the business. And over the years, we were able to service the loan. And so it was that experience really that pushed me to get involved in, or at least want to get involved in providing much cheaper financial solutions to both small to medium-sized entrepreneurs and also to the retail market. So I used that experience somehow as, I used that frustration as a means to push me to get involved in finding ways and providing solutions that would apply to, people like myself and my brothers were once, the position that we were once in, and then see how that would play out over time. And so I set up my own, started small, my own microfinance institution. And the idea then was, and still is, that, based on my understanding of how the market has been in Zambia, which is that the cost of loans still remains very high, from both traditional, lenders in the sense of banks and other lending institutions, and also the non-traditional lending institutions, like the more recent sort of financial technology firms that are existing in the market. They're not that many, but they are there. But it's just that the cost of these loans are quite, I find, are quite high. And I imagine that there are several reasons that these businesses give for why they keep these interest rates so high. But I think that it's that which gives me which pushes my interest to try and provide better solutions. It's somehow through that where I get my, that impetus to want to do something that's different from what everybody else is doing. To somehow prove a point that it is possible to provide cheaper loans, because the businesses are there. There are young entrepreneurs that have a genuine passion of trying to do something big and something that works not only for themselves, but works for the rest of the market. Yeah. And I think it's just about time that we had more institutions showing the willingness to take some risk and invest a bit more, even a quarter of what it is that they need as initial working capital. Invest it in this more, give them a chance, give them a try, and then see how it plays out. Of course, you lose some, you win some, So yeah, I hope I have said something about who I am, and yeah.
Wow, that's very interesting. So these have resulted in the foundation of Lubono, and correct me if I'm not wrong when it comes to it's in Zambian. It's more or less like you're just calling it wealth or riches.
So Lubono, it's actually pronounced Lubono. Is in my Lamba native. So I am Lamba, which is one of the traditional languages in Zambia. And so Lubono is a Lamba word that means wealth. So what we're basically trying to do is to help Zambians build wealth for themselves. And the way you do, at least my understanding on how you could do that, is either by providing, by providing the solutions that give people a chance to either build a business or to borrow more affordably, so that they can do what they need to do for them to move to the next level. So that really is the idea of Lubono.
Oh, very, very, very interesting. So what was more or less like the process to set up the venture? What were the challenges that you faced yourself? Yeah, during the process.
There's several. Yeah, I mean, I hate to say this, but I think that the story of a typical African entrepreneur are very much the same, which is that when you're trying to start out, if you like, it's always, this question of having access to funds to invest in your business, in your idea, is one that I think a lot of entrepreneurs out there can relate to. It's always very difficult to have to find friends, family, or investors who would take up the risk to invest in your business. I suppose this is true across the world, but I think that perhaps it's even more special in our case in Africa.
Yeah.
I was lucky, so I think that really was one of the greatest challenges that I faced, was raising that capital, however small, however large, to invest in the business so that we could start somewhere and, try and improve the concept that we had. But I was lucky in the sense that I got, around the same time as I was developing my concept, I got a consultancy job with the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. And through that, it paid me generously enough. And it was through that I was able to raise at least the seed capital that I needed, or at least part of the seed capital that I needed to set out my venture. And I was also lucky. I've been lucky in the manner that I have had supportive family and friends who have taken up, small loans here and there, and taken the risk and said, hey, Luipa, we think you're heading somewhere, so here's a bit of something. Let's see how that plays out over time. You can pay it back when you're ready. So I think that what really remains the challenge is giving, access to young entrepreneurs, to brilliant, like talented young African minds, that chance, giving them those solutions that give them the chance to do something, to prove that they are capable of doing something that's different.
Oh, very interesting. I came to find this very interesting when it comes to, we are talking about technology and finance. Those are two different broad scopes. So pretty much, it results in you to have a bit of an understanding of how exactly tech works, and at the same time how finances work in general. So pretty much, with your solution, it's a tech-based solution. What were the steps that you actually took so that at least you become apprehended in knowing what's tech, at the same time you also know what's exactly is available for you to run a business in actual essence?
Mm. So let me go back here. So, when I was developing the model, right, I was looking at, so the Central Bank of Zambia has been producing these publication of financial charges. And this is basically a list of microfinance institutions. And I think it's more predominantly the microfinance institutions existing in the country. A list of who they are, or at least some of them, who they are, and how much they're charging in terms of interest per annum. And so I looked at that, and I looked at all the expenses that were involved in sort of disposing a loan or collecting these loans. I realized that there were several, like there was a list of, at least 7, 10 different elements that were attached to providing very, like a small, it doesn't matter the size of the loan, but there was all these unnecessary expenses that were attached to providing a loan. And I say to myself, well, in this modern age, there's no need to have administrative expenses being pushed on the consumer, because you have to print out a piece of paper for them to sign out as, to prove that they have taken this, whatever, a loan agreement of some sort. I said, well, it's getting rid of these intermediary expenses that are basically a noise, that are a distraction in coming up with the real, sort of a more realistic charge on interest. Interest charge, that we will be able to provide a much cheaper cost of loan. And so then the question becomes, how do you get rid of these intermediary expenses? You realize that, well, we're living in this modern age where there's so many technology firms out there that have been providing solutions to basically do that, which is basically clean up, make that process of distribution and collection of loans a bit more seamless, so that people can have access to much more affordable financial solutions that they need. So that was the question that I asked myself. And I started, at that point, I started looking into who, I wrote to several companies, several well-established financial technology firms, between at least the US and Europe. Some in Ukraine, some in, I think France, and a few in Silicon Valley, and all these things. Obviously, it takes a lot of time before people can write back to you and actually can, give you that attention that you need, because they're saying, well, our minimum budget is this. What's your budget? We're looking at companies that are able to generate in excess of $30,000, or we're looking at people that are able to generate in excess of whatever. And you realize that, well, I'm just a small, I'm building a business in Africa, and generating those kinds of revenue isn't impossible, but it requires a bit of time. You have to be patient on that sort of thing.
Yeah, very
so
true.
I was lucky that I came across a company called Mati, which is, they're doing the KYCs and stuff like that, and they're basically a technology stack firm. And they said, well, look, we have an interest. Our interest is primarily the developing market. They're working in Latin America. They're working in some parts of West Africa, and they're also trying to come down to Southern and Central Africa. And so I had this conversation with Pierre, who's the growth manager at Mati, and I think that we kicked it off quite easily. He understood my story. He understood what he basically understood what I was selling and what I was trying to do. And he said, okay, yeah, we can work together. And I think that was the beginning of a good partnership. So it, I have been lucky in the sense that it takes a bit of time before you could actually identify, that technology firm that at least whose purpose and mission will align with yours. It won't perfectly align, but I think that it's just that willingness really to show an interest in wanting to do a business, to do business in Africa. That makes a huge difference. If I think that perhaps in the case of Mati, I think that they're primary focus is really to sort of manipulate alternative data points to be able to sort of help companies or microfinance institutions working in the developing world provide digital financial services.
Wow. That's so much amazing. That's quite amazing. I still remember I once read an article which was talking about collaboration, and pretty much you just talked about it. And I think what exactly would you recommend for aspiring entrepreneurs when it comes to issues like collaboration? I tend to find that a lot of people, they believe in solo, but then yourself, you believe so much in collaboration. I still remember there are a lot of companies which have been built in Europe, in Silicon Valley. They've been using collaboration. Why? Just because they know this is my strength, but this is my weakness. So for the weakness, they look somebody who actually makes that weakness to become a strength. So what's your best recommendation when it comes to aspiring entrepreneur about things to do with collaboration?
Yeah, it's you know, it's an African proverb. I'm reminded of this African proverb that suggests that if you want to go fast, walk alone. But if you want to go far, walk together. I think that we must. I think that we all headed towards, or at least we're all aspiring towards something that's similar, which is trying to build, wealth of some sort for ourselves and for the people that matter in our lives. And I think that if that aspiration remains similar for all of us, then I think we shouldn't shy away from sharing our ideas. As you rightly put it, I think it's only through sharing ideas that we learn how well or how terribly we've designed our product or we've modeled our business. So there really is, I mean, I think that sometimes it's, when you're starting out, the fear is that if you shared your ideas with somebody else, maybe you fear that perhaps they could be in a better, they could be in a better place in the sense of trying to manipulate your idea and use it to their advantage. Yes, that does happen. But I think we must take courage in how unique our ideas are, such that even if you shared it with someone, you know that you have that special ingredient that will make that business run. So I think that as young African, either aspiring or entrepreneurs, already existing entrepreneurs, I think that we must coalesce. We must hold our hands. We must unite towards achieving a more. I think that the ambition, at least this is my belief, I think that the ambition for most of us young African entrepreneurs is really not just about building wealth for the individual. I think that we're trying to build wealth for the individual as well as change the growth trajectory of the African continent. And therefore, if that remains the aspiration that we all have, I think that then we must take courage and we must show that willingness to share ideas, because it's only by sharing ideas that we learn how we can differentiate our product and how we could make it better and if at all actually the market exists for these products. If you keep it to yourself, you don't know if the market actually exists or it doesn't. So really, I think that yes, I think I understand why people would shy away from sharing or collaborating with others, but I think that we should try as hard as we possibly can to work together so that we can achieve the things that we want to achieve, the fundamentals that we have set ourselves to achieve.
Yeah. That's very true. And I've been trying to think around. Well, with the way that you're saying, it sounds like as if your competitive advantage is technology, and by setting up in a business venture using technology, that gives you a lot of opportunities and chance to beat up the competition. So my question is in line with the buzzwords. The buzzwords are blockchain, AI, cryptocurrency. What exactly is your strategy of trying to implement those concepts, and what exactly is your relevance to them in your line of business, or what's the relevance you think is going to impact you as a business owner yourself?
Right. First of all, I think it's not enough to say that our only competitive advantage is technology. Of course, I think that's an important ingredient in building that unique service that we want to provide, or at least that unique identifier that we've been trying to build. But I think that it's that, and also trying to challenge the market, and saying to everybody, well, look, if we can provide loans at this price, or at this sort of lower rate of interest, why can't the rest of you, right? And I think that it's when you begin to sort of ask those questions in the sense of how you practice, you put those questions into practice, and people can see that this can apply, that you pose a challenge to the rest of the market. Now, moving to your question, I think that, there's no doubt about this, that technology is the future. And whether it's blockchain, cryptocurrencies, or whatever it is, I think that these have an important, not only now, but even in the future, will always play an important part in how we transact. I think that I know several, for example, I know several friends of mine, they're entrepreneurs that have been building digital wallets, that could be applicable across the African continent, or could be applicable in Zambia, whatever the case is, right? And therefore that should be a manifestation of how we must all take advantage, or at least try to manipulate the technologies that are existing out there for us to deliver the best product or the best service that we can. Because really, the world this is the world we're living in. This is the world that we will live in. This is the world that our kids are going to live in. And therefore we cannot shy away from understanding how these technologies work and how best we could apply them to our context. I think that really is what matters. How do we use cryptocurrencies the best way we could in Africa? If there's more digital payment solutions coming up in several African countries, what is that suggesting? I suppose that's the question that's posing, is then what happens to the way that transactions have been done? So then people are becoming, are not using cash anymore. They're now services are becoming cashless. And therefore, if that's how, markets are responding, what opportunities exist within these kinds of areas and that sort of thing. So I think that all of these, buzzwords, as you put it, have, or at least all these technologies have an important place in how businesses of today and tomorrow will be tailored.
Oh, wow, amazing. I'm just curious. I'm just curious right now. What's your hidden inspiration? How do you generate new ideas? What makes you to become your thinking tank? Probably the other thing most of entrepreneurs, they differ is how you perceive a problem and how you intend to solve it. So pretty much, I'm just curious. What's your hidden inspiration?
Good question. I see. Growing up in a modest family, where my father worked so hard, worked in the mine so hard for 27 years, and he got paid peanuts at the end of that. I think that always influences how, and sort of trying not to create a similar situation or scenario for my kids or for my grandchildren does really push how I think about things. It does influence how I generate ideas. I like to try and think creatively in the way that we provide solutions. I want to help provide a solution that not only works to me, but works to the benefit of everybody else. So it really is this question of, it's really the element of having grown up in a modest family where I saw my parents working so hard. I saw my dad getting up every morning, working so hard. Growing up in a country where poverty, on a continent where poverty still remains rife, and yet you have people that wake up every day trying to do so, and they genuinely try to do something that's different. They try to apply themselves the best way they can to try and, make ends meet and to carry on through life. I think that provides a good inspiration for me. I mean, it's not hidden, it's obvious. That does provide,
the story of an African child.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's you see this, you see the realities, it's experiencing these realities and knowing that there are people out there that genuinely want to get out there, wake up in the morning, do something different, apply themselves the best way they could, but they just haven't yet had that opportunity. They haven't had the break in life, and therefore, it's not their fault that they've somehow been trapped in this poverty cycle. It's just that unfortunately, this is how life has been, and therefore, can we break that cycle by creating an opportunity for them so that who knows where they could end up, right?
Yeah, very true. So yeah. Are you such a believer that entrepreneurs are just born entrepreneurs, or you believe entrepreneurs can be taught? At the same time, what do you think makes the best formula for somebody to just become an entrepreneur? Why just was this is a very subjective type of a question. Why just was a lot of people, it just happened is to become a conspiracy. That a lot of people, they do believe that entrepreneurship is all about somebody who has just been born with a gift. What's your opinion over that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. So it sounds like a chicken or egg kind of situation, right? What came first? I think that it's I think that as long as you are open-minded, as long as you are adaptable, and you can be persistent, right? I think that you do stand a chance. So if you can, why do I pick out those three features as somehow an important ingredient of who an entrepreneur is, right? I think that generating of ideas, some people are good at generating ideas, and I think that they qualify to be entrepreneurs of their own sort. And some people are good at implementing those ideas, or at least understanding how those ideas could be turned into a product. And some people are good at implementing, picking out the right elements that you need for you to actually put that, product onto the market and make it run, right? And therefore, I think that anyone could be, there's a chance that anyone could be an entrepreneur, but they've got to be willing to, they've got to show that openness to understanding what the problems around where they exist, the problems are, right? Because I think that this is what in some cases, or in most cases, perhaps makes an entrepreneur. It's, you've got to understand, if I'm going to be an entrepreneur, what am I trying to do? What kind of solution am I trying to provide? Because I remember this is what I was taught in business school, right? It's, as an entrepreneur, you're thinking about a problem and how best you could, provide a solution to that problem. And therefore, if you're that kind of a person, if you can see a problem, and you can somehow come up with a solution, I think you do qualify to be an entrepreneur. Perhaps you may not have the solution on how you're going to turn that into, how you're going to implement that. You could come across people that could help you do that, right? So it's not an easy question to answer, but I think that with persistence, with with that openness to learn and to understand things around you, and that willingness to know that when one project fails, you have to quickly move on to the next one, right? That flexibility, that adaptability. I think that more people out there could actually be more, entrepreneurial than they imagine. And I think that I imagine that there's more entrepreneurs on the African continent, because you come across people that sell all kinds of products, and services on the market every day. You go to the market, you find people selling all sorts of things, even things that sometimes you never imagine, right? So I think that, yeah, it's I think that anyone could be an entrepreneur. You just have to have the right structure around you. I think that's what matters.
Yeah, I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense. Why? Just because you happen to find that we have up to almost 90% of unemployment, which is across the continent. And with that high numbers of unemployment, most the World Bank states they are considering the people that are not going for formal businesses, which are formal employment anyways. So as a result, you happen to find that almost each and every country in Africa, we have a lot of informal businesses that we have. So that being said, so I think pretty much those are the simple first step of outlining entrepreneurship. But then the only problem that we do have is we tend to think that we are supposed to start building a bigger startup for us to become an entrepreneur anyway. So we need to install much of that into the mindset of a lot of youth that we do have across the globe, so that at least they don't look at the Mark Zuckerberg type of startups, but then they look at trying to solve the problems that are being faced. For instance, the problem that we're facing in Africa, right? So my question is to you as an entrepreneur: how do you spend the rest of your day? What are the activities that you do? What makes you successful on a daily basis? Then you'll be like, okay, today I've achieved my day goal. How do you do it?
Yeah. I mean, so normally from so Mondays to, like I basically work every day. There's no day when you go without having to think about how you're going to sort out the next problem that you're coming across. So how you're going to best implement the already existing project that I have. So, I basically work every day, but I try to balance out my life between working and doing the things that I like to do. So I normally run on Sundays. So Sunday evenings, my brother and I go for, at least we aim to do at least between, on a worst day, 5, and on a good day, maybe 15 kilometers. So I enjoy doing that. I play footballs on Tuesday evening, from 7 p.m. until sometimes maybe 9 and 9:30 thereabout. So I sort of try to balance out my life a bit more evenly, so that it's not completely drained by my commitment and effort to try and provide solutions to what I believe is a problem in the Zambian market, and perhaps could apply to the rest of the continent. So it's, I wake up, obviously I have a list of things that, I'd always draw up a list of things to do and stuff. And then I sort of tick off what it is that I have achieved on that day. And if there's several things that are pending, I try and begin with those the following day, and then see how well, I would have achieved, I would have gotten through my day. So it's not, it's exciting because every day is a new day. There's always something positive to look forward to. There's always something exciting to look forward to. There's always, several people that come and they want to talk about their venture, and, they want access to financing and all these different types of things. And that makes my life exciting. It makes me happy to think that
you're adding a value.
Especially now. Yes, more and more people have shown the willingness to come, and they want to talk. They don't want to go anywhere else. They would rather come and they want to sit and talk and stuff, even though it's dangerous because now there's COVID. So you can't always have these one-to-one meetings, but, receive several phone calls of people with all kinds of stories. And it's good that people have the courage and have taken, at least they've got the confidence that I could be a solution to their problems. Or at least we as Lubono could be a solution to their problems. So yeah, it's sort of I try to balance out my life. Yeah.
Okay. Very interesting. You mentioned something to do with the pandemic. I think it actually have affected the whole globe, and it's so bad that we are in this period of time. So what do you think if let's just say I'm trying to picture you becoming a magician, then you're given a chance to to change 3 things. What are the things that you change?
Well, change is just across the world, or is this, if you may be more specific, change in what sense?
I think by change, I mean across the world. What are the things that you feel that are supposed to be changing for the better with how we are living today? You're a magician. You told me how you see it. A magician see things, right? So across the globe, what are the things that you feel like, okay, fine, these have to change, and why?
I think that more recently it's this question of trust. I think that with the pandemic, there's been these elements of mistrust that I think have always been there. Mistrust across countries, across continents. So as far as first of all, it was very difficult to know, or for the World Health Organization to determine, or to go to China and to determine how COVID began and all this, the saga around all of this. And now the vaccine, each one of these sort of big countries, big economies has their own company providing, manufacturing their own vaccine and all these kinds of things. And now there's conversations around, the nationalism of vaccines and that sort of thing. And and then some people are asking, but how's at what prices are African countries going to pay for these vaccines? Because if all the big economies are buying these vaccines in bulk, then they're pushing the prices of these things up.
No,
So I think that there's been this element of trust that, well, as a global society, we can all get together when there's a problem, as there is now, when there's a global crisis, that we can trust, China can trust the US, or Africans can trust anything coming out of the Western Bloc as a solution, the vaccine. That would be nice. But I think that clearly what we have learned so far in hindsight is there's a lot of mistrust that's been going on. And therefore, if I was a magician, I think that I would be, sort of waving my wand, hoping that somehow we could, wake up tomorrow and everybody would be feeling a bit more confident and comfortable with the person next to them, and they could give them that benefit of the doubt and assume that nobody is trying to harm anyone, but we have a crisis that started out however it did. And we have to find a solution. We have to, collectively come up with a solution. And now, the other thing that I would change, so I have always, in a very general sense, I have always been a social justice advocate at heart. And this again started in my, university days, going to university in the same town as my parents lived and as I grew up, and somehow seeing how, once a sort of former beautiful mining town was just, dilapidating by the moment. It was just going from bad to worse every day. I decided to involve myself in social justice and fighting, at least being, there to help people that had shown an interest in fighting for social justice would, sort of help them do that. So it's really, I think that economic justice, people have got to have a chance to feel that they are getting a benefit out of what comes out of their country, whether it's, Zambia, Zimbabwe, whatever. I think that people have a right as, as constituent members of every country. I think that we all have a right to feel that we are having a slice of the cake, and it's not just going in the hands of the few elite. And I think that is very, is a conversation that's very much attached to then having some form of political justice, which is having politicians that actually represent the interests of the people. And therefore, I think that if I was a magician, I think that I would be waving my wand and hoping that we would achieve, and I think that would begin by, can we get politicians that really, even at least the 60%, we're not asking for too much, could represent, could be committed to representing the interests of their populations. And then, that would deliver some form of economic justice. People then would take part in any element, would have the confidence to take part in matters of economics.
Okay, wow, amazing. I believe you have to become a magician. You definitely have to. These have to happen.
One day, who knows?
You never know. Yeah. So my next question is, based on the experience that you actually have right now, and based on the microfinance that you've built, let's say somebody, or let's say we are giving you $1,000 today. What are the things that you do, and what are the things that you won't do, and how are you going to invest that $1,000, and why would you invest that $1,000 to those things?
Right. I mean, it's for me, that $1,000 would definitely go into scaling up the business and making sure that it can grow regionally. So make sure that we cover the rest of the Zambian market, and then try and make that grow across the region. At least maybe we could break into Malawi, break into the Congo DRC, and those kinds of markets. So I think that if I was given that kind of money, I would be, immediately looking at, how do we expand? How do we make the business grow? That's the thing that I would do. The thing that I wouldn't do is to go and buy myself an expensive car, because I think that the temptation, I mean, maybe $1,000 isn't too much, but I mean, it wouldn't get you anything anyway. But I think that in light of your question, I think you're trying to understand what it is, people would do with if they were given access to some form of financing. So, I mean, I think for me, what remains a priority really is to scale the business on a national level and also on a regional level. I've always believed that outside, Southern and Central Africa, I think that the eastern, part of Africa remains a huge market. I believe that I've always said this to some of my friends, which is that I think that the next billionaire on the African continent is potentially going to come out of taking advantage, manipulating the Ethiopian market, the market in Tanzania, because you have massive populations, and in Ethiopia, you're looking at a population of more than 90 million people. And then you've got Tanzania, you've got all these places that are densely populated. So that provides you with a massive, massive market that's just waiting to be exploited. Yeah. So for me, expansion really is primary on the things, on the list of things to do.
Wow. You were talking about how you're going to use your $1,000, and then the most important thing that you mentioned is all about expansion. So I'm kind of asking myself, how do you actually perceive opportunities, and how do you see, after looking at the opportunities, what are the metrics that you use to see if or to measure the validity of the opportunities that you can come across with?
If you do remember earlier in our conversation, I said it's always important to be, as an entrepreneur, it's always important to be open-minded. And this is because I believe that opportunities exist in the market. Yes, you could be a Steve Jobs who thinks ahead of time and comes up with an iPod or with an Apple computer, whatever, right? You could be that, but I think that is also well informed by you being exposed to the market, which is, talking to people and understanding what their challenges, what their problems are, understanding what people, how people live their lives on a daily basis. It's through that you begin to understand how well you can craft, whether it's a product or a service, that helps people live their best lives. Because I imagine, at least at the back of my head, I'm thinking, well, the point of my product is to enhance somebody's life, right? Is to be able to facilitate a person's business transactions, or a person's, if it's in the sense of retail products, it's being able to facilitate their expenses. And therefore, at what price do you do that, right? So I think that, what remains important, right? How do I generate ideas? I think it's really by being open enough to talk to as many people as I possibly can do, but spend a bit more time researching, going out into the market and speak to people and all sorts of things. Are there any specific matrices that we use? I think that traditionally, when you're investing in a business, I think that there's certain basic fundamentals that everybody looks at, right? So what's the initial capital investment that's required for us to invest in this project, and how long is it going to take for us to be able to recover that investment? Are we spending too much? Are we going to be spending too much and getting out too little in a long time? Are we going to be breaking even for the next 5 years? Are we breaking even for the next 10 years? If that's the case, then that's an investment that's not worthwhile. We might as well look at something else, right? I think they say generally, if you start a project and you run the first couple of years, you're trying to it's teething phase, you know what I mean? Going through all kinds of hoops and things. And in the third year, you really should understand if this is a business that will be successful. And therefore, towards the beginning of your fourth year, thereabout, you should know that this is a successful venture. And that's by looking at how much you've invested and how that's stemmed, what kind of return you've had on those types of investments that you've made. So those are some of the sort of traditional matrices that we use, or that I use, to try and determine how successful or unsuccessful a business will be. And yeah, I mean, I sometimes think that I mean, as long as you're sure that what you're coming up with is not a fad, it's not a service or a product that will only last for 2 days or for 3 days and then is slowly phased out. It's something that will last for the long term. And sometimes it can be difficult to have already determined matrices that help you identify if that will be the case until you actually have your concept together and you throw it out in the market. Do you actually know that this will be successful? So it's a sort of, you're never too sure if it's going to work out. But I think as long as you remain committed to what it is that you're trying to do, I think you tell yourself, well, let's try it out and let's see how it's going to play out. Given that you've done some predictions, at least especially financial predictions, that you're not investing too much in something that will not take you anywhere. So balancing things out in that way.
Wow. Wow. This interview has just been awesome. It's so eye-opening. I myself, I'm charged, that feeling that, this has been so helpful. And I do believe and hope a lot of youth and a lot of entrepreneurs are going to reach out to you, trying to get a lot of advice on how to set it up, some other questions that they might have, and so that at least they can build up a network with you. So my last question before we concluded this whole meeting, which is awesome, that I don't want to end it, but I have to. I would love to ask you, what's your best advices that you could give up to aspiring entrepreneurs as takeaways? What are your takeaways?
You see, it's if I knew how my tomorrow is going to turn out, there's a lot of things that I would do today that would make my tomorrow different. But the point is, we hardly ever know how the future or what is in the future for us. And therefore, I think that for most of us young African entrepreneurs, I think we must take courage and remain committed to this entrepreneurial journey that we've put ourselves on. It is true, Africa is touted to be the last frontier of development. And if that's the case, it means that if the argument is that we are in the developing phase, we're transitioning from underdevelopment to development, then there's a whole lot of opportunities that are there for anyone with a brilliant mind, anyone committed. They don't have to be a brilliant mind, but anyone with the discipline and commitment to try and execute a project or a concept that they believe could change the life of the person next to them. We must take courage in that. We must remain committed to doing that. And we must try as hard as we can, however difficult this may be. We must try as hard as we can to collaborate, to work together, because the best solutions won't come out of the US. The best solutions for the African market won't come out of the US or the European Union. The best solutions for Africa are going to come from Africans. They are coming from Africa. We've got companies like Chipakash that are doing great stuff. We've got several other companies that are doing wonderful things, delivering projects wonderfully. So we must all look up to some of the companies that are, already, doing even greater things, and say to ourselves, we can all do it. We can all change the growth trajectory of the African continent. And the best way to do it is if we remain open, disciplined, and committed to working towards what we've set ourselves to achieve.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much for the time, for making time for me. And I really do enjoy talking to you, and I have learned a lot from your experience. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Calvin. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Sure, it's all right. Have a lovely day.
All right, you too, man. Take care.
Oh, sure.